Welcome to the deep dive. We've gathered our sources, and today we're diving into something really fundamental for, well, for a healthy life: psychological and relational boundaries. Our mission today is pretty straightforward. We're going to unpack what these sort of invisible lines actually are, look at what happens when they break down, sometimes spectacularly, and pull out some really practical laws you can use to build a healthier system for yourself. We'll anchor it all in one very relatable case study.
Yeah, that case study is Shelley. Her day starts at 6 a.m. with this just crushing sense of dread hitting her the moment the alarm goes off. Now, on paper, she looks functional. She's an HR director, a working mom.
Seems okay from the outside.
Right. But the source material paints a really clear picture. Internally, it's chaos. She's isolated and deeply, deeply burned out emotionally.
And you see that chaos right away, don't you? Her morning starts with being late for work, sneaking into this executive meeting.
Hmm.
But the anxiety, it actually started the night before. There was this major boundary failure.
The costume incident.
Exactly. She absolutely needed to sew her daughter Amy's costume. It was important. But then her widowed mother drops by.
And turns that widowhood into, well, kind of an emotional weapon, right?
Totally. It's the classic guilt trip.
Mm.
Shelley even gently suggests maybe she could sew while they chat, and the mother hits back with, "Oh, I would hate to interrupt you and your family. I'm just a lonely old lady who gave her life to her children."
Oof. Yeah, that is a direct invasion, isn't it? It basically forces Shelley to ditch her own need sleep, her daughter's costume, to manage her mother's feelings.
So the sources nail her type immediately.
Oh, yeah. Shelley is the classic compliant personality. Her biggest fear. It's disappointing people, or even worse, sparking any kind of conflict with people she cares about.
So she just overrides herself.
Constantly. She keeps chasing this idea of peace on the surface, but, she never actually gets there. It's a cycle.
Okay, so if Shelley's constantly letting people cross her lines, what are these lines? What exactly are boundaries?
All right, let's define that. If you strip away all the jargon, boundaries are really just these invisible lines that establish owner responsibility.
Owner responsibility, like property lines.
Exactly like property lines. They clearly define what's me and what's not me. Everything inside your line, your feelings, your attitudes, your choices, your behaviors, that's your responsibility, yours alone.
And this connects to a really important distinction the research highlights, drawing from, well, ancient wisdom, actually, the difference between a daily load and a heavy burden.
Mm-hmm. Explain that a bit.
Your daily load, that's like your everyday backpack, right? It's got your feelings, your choices, your tasks, the stuff you have to manage day to day. A burden, though, that's different. That's a crisis, a tragedy. Something genuinely too heavy to carry by yourself.
Got it. Load is daily management, burden is crisis.
Exactly. And Shelley's core problem, the thing that's exhausting her, she fundamentally believes it's her job to carry everyone else's load.
So not just the burdens, but the everyday stuff too.
Yeah. She's trying to fix her mother's loneliness, absorb her husband's anger, manage her friend Lois's constant dramas. She's taking responsibility for things that are just not hers.
And the result is predictable, isn't it? When you constantly take responsibility for things outside your own property line, you just end up completely drained.
Exhausted.
Yeah, exhausted, bitter, and feeling like you have absolutely no control over your own life. Shelley might be everyone's reliable person, but she's running on empty because those lines of responsibility are just totally blurred.
Okay, let's shift gears then. Let's look at the conflicts this blurring actually creates. The sources lay out four main ways boundaries tend to fail, and Shelley, well, she's a perfect illustration of the first two.
Right. So, conflict one, the compliant. This is Shelley to a T. It's basically having a fence with no gate. You can't say no to the bad stuff, the draining stuff.
And then there's her boss, Jeff Moran.
Yeah, Jeff. He comes over with that, overly sweet kind of manipulative approach.
You're so reliable.
Right. And asks her to edit this huge board report, 5 hours of work.
Yeah.
With less than 24 hours notice.
Yeah.
It's his planning failure.
And Shelley's furious inside. She sees exactly what's happening. He wants her to save him at the expense of her own time, her evening. But what does she say?
Of course, Jeff. Happy to help. You know I'm reliable. It's almost automatic.
And that internal thought she has, it's brutal. She thinks reliable, dependable, trustworthy. Sounds like they're describing a good mule.
Yeah, that really shows the depth of the resentment, doesn't it? The self-neglect is just built up over time. It's painful.
And it connects directly to the next conflict type.
Right. Conflict two, the controller. These are the people who just refuse to respect other people's boundaries. They don't want to carry their own load, so they try to force or manipulate others into picking it up for them. Jeff Moran's a clear example, offloading his work problem onto Shelley.
But the really deep example here is her husband, Walter.
Walter. His temper seems to have gotten worse over time. Any little thing can set off these angry outbursts.
And the dynamic has shifted completely, hasn't it? It's described as turning into a parent-child relationship.
Yeah, where Shelley is the child, constantly trying to manage and appease the parent, Walter. It's a total reversal of a healthy partnership.
The sources even detail her strategy for dealing with him, this three-step plan she uses.
Which is completely futile, by the way.
Right. Step 1, anticipate the anger. Step 2, withdraw and apologize immediately to, like, dissolve his rage before it fully erupts. Step 3, do something extra, like cook his favorite meal to show she's sorry and trying.
It's all about managing his emotions, his load.
And the tragedy is, it doesn't even bring lasting peace. The anger keeps coming back, and this whole process is just, it's eating away at her love for him. It's being replaced by fear and this simmering resentment.
Exactly. She's trying to control something uncontrollable, his anger, by basically sacrificing herself. That's the core of being over-responsible.
So that's compliance and controllers. What's the third conflict type?
Conflict 3 is the non-responsive. This is kind of the opposite problem. It's having boundaries that are too rigid, walls instead of fences. It's a failure to engage or respond to another person's legitimate needs, particularly emotional needs. It's neglecting the responsibility of love.
Okay, so not taking on too much, but giving too little.
Precisely.
Hmm.
The sources use the example of Mike and Brenda. Brenda tries to share something vulnerable, maybe she's feeling down or anxious.
And Mike just shuts it down.
Yeah, he tells her to just solve the problem or change her feelings. He dismisses the emotion. Now, Mike doesn't have to carry her despair, that's her load. But as her partner, he does have a responsibility to connect, to offer comfort, to be present.
So he puts up a wall where connection should be.
Exactly. It's a cold, non-responsive boundary right where warmth and love are needed.
And when you have all this boundary chaos in a family, the compliancy, the controlling, the non-responsiveness, it affects everyone, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It creates a toxic environment. You see the fallout clearly with Shelley's kids.
Her son, Todd, right. He's described as explosively defiant when rules are enforced.
Which makes sense if the primary rule enforcer, Shelley, constantly avoids conflict and isn't consistent because she's trying to appease Walter or just keep the peace. He hasn't learned to respect limits because the limits are blurry.
And then there's Amy, her daughter, the quiet one.
Yeah, Amy's withdrawn. She's described as having this unreachable part in her heart. It's likely a defense mechanism, a protective wall she's built because the emotional environment at home feels unstable or unsafe due to the lack of healthy boundaries.
It's really heartbreaking to see how these patterns impact the whole family system.
It is. And it highlights why understanding and fixing boundaries is so crucial.
Okay, so we've spent some time looking at the problems, which is important for understanding.
Diagnosis first. Right. But now we need to pivot to the solutions. How do you actually start rebuilding?
Yeah.
The key insight from the sources is that the solution isn't about manipulating or changing other people. It's about developing self-control.
Okay, so focusing inward.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the sources offer these really practical laws for boundaries. The first one, it's often the toughest, but maybe the most vital. The law of sowing and reaping.
Consequences.
Yes, it means you absolutely must allow other people to experience the natural, often unpleasant consequences of their own irresponsible actions. You have to let them reap what they sow.
So stop rescuing them from the results of their choices. Like, the consequence is the barbed wire on the fence, and we have to stop cutting it down for them.
That's a great way to put it.
Right.
Stop removing the barbs. The sources use this really potent analogy of Joshua. He's 25, supposedly a student, but also struggling with addiction. His parents, they constantly bail him out, pay his rent, his debts, his fines.
They're essentially enabling him.
They're watering his lawn for him, as the saying goes. The advice given is blunt. Stop watering his lawn. If Joshua doesn't take responsibility for his own life, his own grass, he needs to experience the discomfort of that dry ground. Painful consequences can be powerful teachers.
Okay, that makes sense, even if it's hard in practice. What's the next law?
Law 2 is the law of power. This one forces us to get real about what we can, and more importantly, what we cannot control.
Which is a lot of things.
A lot of things. We can't control the past, we can't control the economy, and crucially, we cannot control other people.
So for someone like Shelley, This means,
It means she has to stop pouring all her energy into trying to manage Walter's temper or fix Lois's never-ending crises or cure her mother's loneliness. She simply cannot change their behavior or their internal states.
that sounds terrifying for a compliant person.
It is initially,
Yeah.
but it's also incredibly liberating once you accept it, because it frees you up to focus on the one thing you actually do have power over.
You're-
Exactly. The only thing you truly have the power to change is your own responses, your own actions, your own boundaries.
And the sources suggest something interesting happens then, right? When Shelley, for example, changes her response, but maybe she stops apologizing for Walter's anger, or she says no to Jeff's unreasonable request.
Then the old patterns, the destructive tactics used by the controllers of the crisis-prone people in her life, they suddenly stop working as effectively.
Because she's changed the dynamic.
Right. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, when their old methods fail, it actually prompts them to reconsider their own behavior. It might force them to change, even though changing them wasn't Shelley's goal. Her goal was just to protect herself.
That's powerful. Okay, so law of consequences, law of power. What's law three?
Law 3 is the law of exposure. Boundaries are pretty useless if they're invisible secrets. They need to be communicated, they need to be exposed.
So this is where the compliant person really struggles, because it means actually speaking up.
It does. It requires using language, clear and direct language. Things like, no, I can't do that right now. Or, I feel uncomfortable when you raise your voice, and I'll need to step away if it continues.
Moving away from the passive-aggressive stuff.
Exactly. Moving away from the behaviors that currently define Shelley's approach. The silent treatments, the avoidance, the building up of secret resentment, especially towards Walter.
Because that resentment always comes out eventually, doesn't it?
Always. And usually in a much more damaging explosion than if the boundary had been clearly, kindly stated up front. Exposure, having those honest, sometimes difficult conversations, is what prevents the big crisis later on.
Okay, so we've gone through Shelley's chaos, identified the boundary failures, and now we have these three laws: consequences, power, exposure as a path forward. It feels like the core message is that boundaries aren't selfish walls.
Not at all. They're actually an act of good stewardship, good self-management. They protect your internal resources, your energy, your sense of self. And they clarify who owns what responsibility in relationships.
Which is essential for love, right? You can't really love others well if you're constantly depleted or resentful.
Precisely. You need a healthy self to bring to any relationship. And this actually leads us to the final, really potent idea from the source material. It tackles what happens after a boundary gets violated, which inevitably happens sometimes.
Okay, what do you do then?
Well, often our instinct is to feel like we're owed something. There's a debt created. We want an apology, maybe restitution, at least recognition of the hurt caused.
Makes sense.
It does. But the sources suggest that perhaps the ultimate act of boundary clarity, the final step in reclaiming your power, is actually forgiveness.
Forgiveness. Wait, how does that work? Isn't that just letting the person who crossed the boundary off the hook?
It sounds like it, but it's actually the opposite. It's about setting yourself free. Forgiveness, in this specific boundary context, means you consciously decide to cancel the debt.
Cancel the debt?
Yeah. You stop trying to extract payment, whether that payment is an apology you know you'll never get or understanding from someone incapable of giving it. You recognize they can't or won't pay, so you stop demanding it.
Why? What does that achieve?
It achieves clarity. It acknowledges the reality of the situation and the other person's limitations. And most importantly, by letting go of the demand, by canceling that debt, you sever that dysfunctional tie. You free yourself from waiting for something they can't give. It clarifies the boundary and releases you.
Wow. So instead of staying stuck waiting for Walter or her mother to finally get it, Shelley could choose to just stop trying to collect on that emotional debt.
Exactly. It's a profound shift.
Yeah.
It's the final move in truly owning your own life and your own emotional well-being.
That's a really powerful thought to end on.
It is. So maybe something for you to consider this week. Think about your own life. Is there someone who consistently pushes past your boundaries, maybe asks you to carry their load? If so, what's just one small emotional debt? Maybe a need for apology or recognition that you could choose to forgive simply to reclaim your own peace and energy? That small act of letting go might just be the first step in rebuilding your own fence.